Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 138 of Caropop. Our guest this week wrote, sang, and played lead guitar on many of the Bangles' best songs, Vicki Peterson. She was the most prolific songwriter in a band that kept having hits that they didn't write. That was kind of a weird dynamic. I'll just note that when I fell hard for the Bangles upon the release of their 1984 debut album, All Over the Place, it was on the basis of its originals, and Peterson wrote or co-wrote all 9 of them. The co-writes with fellow singer-guitarist Susanna Hoffs include Hero Takes a Fall, Dover Beach, and Restless. The songs on which Peterson was the sole writer include James, All About You, He's Got a Secret, and More Than Meets the Eye, though Hoffs wound up singing lead on 2 of those. Peterson explains how that happened. The covers versus originals tension was on greater display on the breakthrough second album, 1986's Different Light. It opens with the heavily produced Prince-written single Manic Monday before Peterson's guitar kicks in and the band sounds like the Bangles of old on In a Different Light. But it was the songs from outside writers, especially Liam Sternberg's Walk Like an Egyptian, that made the Bangles famous, with Hoffs often in the spotlight. By their third album, 1988's Everything, the band members were collaborating with outside writers more than each other, and the smash hit Eternal Flame sounded miles away from Hero Takes a Fall. There wouldn't be a fourth Bangles album for 15 years. Peterson takes us through the band's formation, the enlisting of her younger sister Debbi, a previous Caropop guest, on drums, and the additions of Hoffs and, after the first EP, bassist Michael Steele. She gets into pressures from the record label and producer David Kahn, plus tensions and conflicting agendas that culminated in a painful Bangles breakup meeting. It's worth noting that there is no Vicki Peterson solo album, at least not yet. She has been a band person through and through. And after the Bangles implosion, she joined the Continental Drifters, an all-star collective that included former Caropop guest Peter Holsapple of the DBs, Susan Cowsill, Mark Walton, and others. Peterson and Susan Cowsill also performed together for years as the Psycho Sisters and released an album, Up on the Chair Beatrice, in 2014. Vicki Peterson is married to John Cowsill, Susan's brother, who also drums with her, including in the band Action Skulls with Billy Mummy. Does Peterson especially like making music with family members? How did she enjoy touring with the Go-Go's as the fill-in guitarist? Does she foresee the Bangles performing or recording together again? What is her creative life like now? No surprise, Vicki Peterson is smart, revealing, and down-to-earth as she reflects on a brilliant musical career. Please enjoy this Caropop conversation with Vicki Peterson. Thank you for doing this. I really do appreciate it. It's really good to talk to you. I went to Penn and you guys played at Irvine Auditorium, I think the next year after, like March of, I looked it up, March of 86.
86, yes.
So, yeah. And I remember you guys covering 7 and 7 Is.
Yes.
So, and I was into Love then, so I thought, oh, that's cool, because I didn't think anyone else knew that. So,
yes, that was one of those bands that when Debbi and I first met Susanna, and she knew who Arthur Lee and Love were, and she knew who, and she was a Paul Revere and the Raiders fan, but she was also into the Stones and the Beatles and Patti Smith and television. So it was interesting for me to find somebody who respected and loved Arthur Lee and Love as well, because I did as well. That album, for whatever reason, was that reminds me more of the 80s than it, because I wasn't conscious enough in the 60s to be all over that, but it's a great record.
Forever Changes was like, whoa, what is this record? Right? It's just kind of like fills like a niche that no other record ever has. Like, and I listen to it all the time. I had Johnny Eccles on. I talked to him. And that was amazing. And then I just had Bruce Botnick, who produced Forever Changes. And we were talking mostly about the Doors because he had all this Doors stuff that came out. But I'm like, you have to tell me about working on Forever Changes and, what was going on in the band and why were they not on 2 of the songs and all of that stuff. But
yeah, that must have been interesting, the Brian versus Arthur stuff. And yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about was, it's like you came into this and you were a songwriter and singer and guitarist before you formed the Bangles. Mm-hmm. Did you always envision yourself as being a band person versus a solo person? Because almost everything you've done has been in collaboration with people as opposed to, here I am, look at me.
No, I describe myself as a serial band member. I've just, from day one, although I was playing guitar and writing songs alone as a 9-year-old, 10-year-old. But by the time I was 15, 16, I had connected with my best friend in high school, Amanda, and it was like, let's be in a band. Let's be in a band. Let's be the female Simon and Garfunkel. And then let's be, we went from there to forming a band with our friends. And it was the classic high school band. You're in band with friends, and it's not so much based on people's musical ability. It's just more fun and hanging out and playing songs you like. And but we went from there straight to playing clubs. And when I was at UCLA, we were booking shows and playing clubs all through the early 80s, late 70s and early 80s. And then my partner, Amanda, left to pursue a history degree and another whole different lifestyle. And so Debbi and I were left, and that's when we met Susanna and we started the Bangs.
Right. And with Debbi, who's your little sister, at what point did you think, oh, I want her in the band?
I didn't. I was an idiot that way, but it never occurred to me that she was who she was as a musician. Because, I had an older sister, Pam, and our older sister was she was the musical guru in certain ways. She had the record collection. She had the Arthur Lee and Love records. She had the, Dave Clark 5 records. She kind of set the musical tone in the house. And so I was more paired up with her. And then my younger siblings, Debbi and our baby brother, Dave, who's another incredible musician and sound engineer. They were the babies, so they were sort of over there because we're all about 2.5 years apart, but it's sort of, as families do, we were sort of bifurcated. And
right.
The girls and the babies. So Debbi wasn't even really on my radar. I wasn't paying attention to how closely she was paying attention. She was paying attention to everything I did. We shared a room because I never had my own room. We shared our room, a room together. And so music was always playing. And I would notice that she was a very adept air bass player, air drummer, air guitar player. She would absolutely mime the parts. And she was listening actually in a way more carefully than I was to records. And so when it came time to look for a drummer, we had a couple guys play with us. We had one woman come and audition for us at one point, but she was driving from way out of town and she was a little older than we were. I think she was 20. Oh my God. So it was like, that wasn't going to work. And so it was actually my friend Amanda who said, well, why don't we try Debbi? And I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't even, I was not paying attention, as I say, but we sat her down at a drum kit and she was an absolute natural from day one. And
she hadn't sat at a drum kit before?
She had not.
So Amanda just was like, let's try your sister who's never drummed as our drummer.
She was, like I said, she was probably watching a little better than I, and didn't have this sort of preconceived notion of, Debbi as a child and not a human being and a musician. Right. And I'm giving Debbi tons of credit here because she's very, very tolerant of all this. And plus Debbi was starting to hang around a little bit more. So we were kind of just spending time with her and stuff. And so it was just sort of like, yeah, well, let's see. And we did it publicly. We did it with some friends of ours who were in a proper grown-up cover band. They worked all the time playing, not so much clubs, but events and schools and that sort of things. They were a cover band. Unlike us, we were sort of somewhere in the middle between a band trying to write original material and then doing really kind of horrific versions of cover songs. And but we went to their rehearsal space and they were kind enough to take a break and then sit Debbi down at a kit and say, okay. And the drummer of that band just kind of gave her the whole, like, we'll do this. And she goes, and he just like, it was, like I said, it was just an instant. And then we played a song with her. And then it was just like, okay, you're in.
Do you remember what the song was?
Yes, it was Heat Wave.
Oh, the Martha Vandel's?
Martha Vandel's, yeah.
Nice. When you were growing up, would you like sing songs around the piano or the guitar? Would you harmonize with each other?
We were in the car. We were in the Buick station wagon, and that was where the harmonies happened. And like I said, our older sister, she would get the shotgun seat because she would call it first. And so she got to control the radio. But Debbi and I, who were sitting in the back of the station wagon, would be singing along. And we always, for whatever reason, gravitated to the background harmonies. And we would sort of naturally kind of split up, or I'm going to go for the high, you go for the middle. Okay. And without discussing it. And so that was sort of a natural inclination for us for some reason. And I knew all the lyrics to these songs, but loved singing the harmonies.
When you started writing songs, were you thinking of harmonies right off the bat?
Not in the earliest of days. I was sort of writing cringe-worthy sort of Joni Mitchell, emotional teenage girl songs.
Do you remember the first song you wrote?
Yes, I think it was called I Think It's Love. And
wow.
The chords were E, A, and D.
Solid chords. Those are, well-established changes there.
Nope, there was 3 of them. And that's, yeah.
What was the earliest song that you wrote that you thought, wait a minute, this one's really good?
Oh, God. That wasn't until later. I was pretty critical and rightly so of the early stuff. I was writing some songs in around 17, 18 years old, 19, that started to become pretty good. I wrote the beginnings of what became He's Got a Secret, and James, both around that age. And so I knew that those were pretty solid songs.
What was your routine in writing then? Would you come up with lyrics and then pick up a guitar and figure out the chords, or would you just kind of strum and then whatever came out was the song?
Yes.
The latter.
D, all of the above. Normally I would start with the guitar, but I usually had a sort of a lyric idea or a title or just a song idea, if not an actual lyric. And but the guitar would be in my hands, and I would come up with a change, usually something more interesting than AED, but not always. A riff, perhaps, and then it would go from there. But I was actually writing way more regularly than I do now, unfortunately, because just your life is not quite so distracted. And, occasionally I'd get the comment from my dad that, what are you doing in here? Your mother was doing dishes. You should go help your mother, instead of sitting in here wasting your time playing guitar. And there was a little of that.
When you would write something like James, would there be a real James in your mind, or was James a character that you want to write a song about?
James was a character, but it was based on a true story. It was based on my college roommate who was having a sort of a, probably now would be called a non-politically correct affair with her professor. So I sort of took the situation that was actually happening and created a story.
When did you realize that things clicked musically with you and Susanna?
The first day we met. Debbi and I drove away from her house, and we lived in Hollywood. Susanna lived in Brentwood, and we, it was quite of a schlep. So driving there, we're like, what are we doing? This is the weirdest thing. I've talked to this person on the phone one time, and we're meeting, and we'll just see what happens. And we talked, we sat down, we played some music. She played me a cassette of something she had done. We played her cassettes of things we had done, and we sang together. And that was the clincher for me when Debbi and Susanna and I sang together, and I heard what happened with the blend of our voices. And then also talking to her, like, what are you looking for? What do you want to do? And she was, like, yeah, everything. I want it all. I want world domination. And so we drove away saying, okay, we have a band again. We have a new.
She'd answered an ad. Was that it?
She called an ad that had been replaced by our housemate, who we had, strangely enough, we had just fired from our group. She was our lead guitar player. And so as my friend Amanda went off to get her history degree, we fired the guitar player. And so it was just down to Debbi and me. And so Lynn, a guitar player, had put an ad in The Recycler, which some of your listeners might know was a pre-Craigslist, pre-internet place where you would advertise everything from a refrigerator to a bass player. And Susanna was looking for people to play with. And so she saw Lynn's ad, and she called the apartment looking for Lynn, who was not there. Happily,
right.
For me.
Stole her.
I did, but I was ethical about it, because after talking with Susanna for about an hour and a half, the first time we connected on the phone, I said, okay, well, I know you called to talk to Lynn, so I'll give Lynn your message, and and you guys can have your conversation, which they did. And I asked Lynn, it's like, what? So what do you think? And she's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't really feel it. I don't think she's right. And we're like, okay, good.
How specific was the ad, by the way? Was it like someone who likes television and love, or
no? That it would have been.
You didn't even place the ad.
I didn't write it. If I had written it, yes, absolutely. But no, I think she was just looking for another guitar player to start a band with. Lynn was, and her musical loves right then were pretty much the Stones and Tom Petty, which still fits into our musical vision for sure. But that was really that was the lane Lynn was working in.
Do you remember the first song you wrote with Sue?
I think it might have been "Tell Me" or "Call on Me." Yeah, it was in that group of songs.
And so how did those collaborations work? Would you sit there with guitars and just come up with it, or one of you bring in part of a song and have the other one finish it? Or
at that point, we were sitting in her apartment garage apartment, and would just have an idea. Often it was a musical idea or a rhythmic idea. "Call on Me" was very Beatles. "Tell Me" was more sort of Stones. I don't know. We would come up with musical touchstones to grab onto.
And then what was the playing out like? Like, what was the scene like when you started, playing clubs and all of that?
Well, first of all, we had to find a bass player, and that wasn't super easy. But we did find Annette Zelinskas. Oddly enough, it's sort of one of those foreshadowing things. I remember Susanna asked a friend of hers, so who's the best female bass player in LA? And the answer was Michael Steele. Or Mickey Steele. And Sue had called her, and Mickey was like, I want nothing to do with an all-girl band. She had runaway PTSD.
Right.
She had been Runaways very briefly. And so she was not interested at all in being in an all-female band. Understandable. So that was put aside, and we found Annette through ads in the paper, and she couldn't have been sweeter and more, willing to learn and willing to play and just lovely. So we just started playing. The first few shows we played were with like punk rock bands, and just of course bottom of the bill for the most part, and but having a great time, having a blast.
From the start, were you like the Bangs were an all female band? It's important that we're doing that.
Yes. Yeah, I think it just felt, I had experience playing with mixed gender bands, and it just never worked for me. And there was always complications, and usually my fault, because the man in our band was my boyfriend in high school. So it just always got complicated. And so didn't want that. We're straight women. Being a band with other straight women, you're probably going to have less of those kinds of complications. So it was important because it just felt more unified, and it felt more like that feeling of like we're in a gang. We're in a gang. We're in a club, and it was the no boys allowed club at that point.
And did you look at bands like the Runaways or the Go-Go's as sort of like feeling like, okay, they've made it a little bit easier for us, or did you still bang your head against a lot of, sexism, basically?
Oh, no, of course, there was still tons of that. You have to understand, we're like ratio-wise, we're in the tiniest little increment of collections of bands in Los Angeles. The Runaways for me they didn't count, because as far as I was concerned, they were put together by a man. They were, a whole different thing. It wasn't until, years later that I, developed a ton of respect for, Joan and Lita and, Jackie and Sandy and the original members, especially. I did not like how that developed. That was exactly everything I was working against, was to be formed by somebody else's idea of what we're supposed to be. And especially a man who was trying to hypersexualize you, and that sort of thing was exactly what I did not want and fought against over and over and over again. And the Go-Go's were very much a part of what was happening in LA right then, but they had gone to London around the time that the Bangs first started to play. So they weren't around. And I would ask friends, so do you think people are just going to compare us to the Go-Go's the whole time? And they said, oh no, you're completely different. You're a completely different band. You're a different market. You're a different, this is even before the Bangs, when my band with Amanda and Debbi were playing clubs, we were like a power pop band, actually. So it was a very different aesthetic. So, but yes, of course, the Go-Go's have to get credit for making it clear to the corporate world that this business model works. That it's okay to sign a quote unquote all girl band, and you're gonna, you might make some money. So that was helpful to us in the end, for sure.
Yeah, I didn't equate, musically at least, I didn't equate the two bands.
No.
You guys came more from kind of where I was living, in terms of my, like 60s file, Beatle-y, 3-minute perfect pop song. I mean, all over the place is just one after the other of those. It's like this sort of like rubber soul for the 80s. Like I really, like at the time, like that was really how I reacted to it. And I didn't think like, oh, it's like a female. I was just like, no, this is just like rubber soul for the 80s. And the Go-Go's I really liked too. And I liked the Specials, and they've been on the Specials record, and so but it just came from a slightly different place. But obviously both bands also had image makers who were trying to give you guys visual makeovers, which a band like REM I don't think had to deal with.
Exactly. I know. I would use REM as my like the comparison, the control group. Well, they didn't have to deal with that, and they got to speak together as a group and fight against their label if they had to, and that sort of thing.
Well, and like the early videos you guys are wearing, I mean, and I don't know whether you were being outfitted for those as well, but it seemed more like it was not glammed up. It was like, hey, we're just kind of these boho, I don't know what I'm going to use some wrong terms, but it was, you were not dressed up, you were more dressed down and just kind of looked like regular people. And then later it just seemed like the image stuff got pumped up. And I don't know how much of that was, you guys seem like, oh, we're on a bigger stage now, we have to be more conscious versus it being imposed on you.
That's so interesting that you say Hero Takes a Fall, because that was our first Columbia video that we had made. Before that, we had made a video from the EP Real World.
Yeah.
That's when we made completely ourselves with friends. And in those videos, we're wearing our normal thrift shop clothes that we, there was no wardrobe budget. There was just what you had. And then, so with Hero Takes a Fall, that was our first experience with a label trying to quote unquote dress us up or style us. And I find it mildly horrifying what we ended up wearing in that video. And that was not, to me, regular people stuff. That's very much cliched 80s. Sort of ironically, after Hero Takes a Fall, we said, okay, well, no more of that. And so the next big video that we did, either Going Down to Liverpool or Manic Monday, we're wearing our own clothes. Again.
There you go.
Yeah.
The Scott Miller quote about you guys from his What Happened book?
Uh-oh.
By the way? No. He's in that book, which you have to pay like hundreds of dollars to find now, but I have one. Scott Miller from Game Theory, who I also got really into at that time.
Yes, absolutely.
He said that he called The Real World one of the top songs of the 1980s and wrote about the EP. Those who know only Eternal Flame might be amazed at how inventive and together they were in their relative infancy.
Aw, thank you, Scott. Yeah, I mean, the people who, again, and it's the majority, I guess, probably now, is the people who know Eternal Flame or Walk Like an Egyptian, you don't know anything about the Bangles. And that's just the truth. You just don't.
Well, if those got you to go back to the other records, then you're all right. But,
yeah, absolutely. Please go dig deep.
So in All Over the Place, you worked with David Kahn.
Mm-hmm.
What was sort of the tug of war on, dealing with the sort of studio interests on that record versus what you guys wanted to sound like?
It was a struggle on that one. It was a struggle on all of them, actually, to be honest, with David Kahn. But it was our first major studio experience. We had recorded the EP with Craig Leon. We did it in, like 3 days, very quickly. all over the place. Of course, now we're on a major label and there's a major budget and there's money involved. David Kahn's under incredible pressure to deliver something, which of course, that's not what you want to be aware of when you're trying to make a record, but it was there. He's also trying to figure out who we are and what we can do and what we can't do in his mind. And he's very, very particular, very, very, very intelligent man, but also somebody who does not have the best bedside manner. We're not the only band he's made cry. And yet, as far as the studio went, I think we learned a lot from him. And he did a lot. He made a lot of really wonderful choices. But then also, I felt like I was fighting him a lot. I fought tooth and nail for real strings on More Than Meets the Eye. He did a synth version, and it was not going to work for me. And so I just said, I just really do not want synth. It just went against every fiber of my being at that moment to have that sound on a record.
Right. It's such a not synth record too.
Exactly. It was very organic. There was nothing that wasn't pretty much created by, our 8 hands. So it did not work for me. So I fought him on it, and he didn't, obviously, he's thinking bottom line, he's thinking budget. But luckily, I think for the song and for the record, I prevailed. And he and Jimmy Haskell did a beautiful string arrangement for that song. Otherwise,
arranging wise, were you pretty much left alone, or?
Yeah. I mean, it started with us. He would have, he would have input. There was something that he felt like these two songs have the grooves are too similar on this. They both sound like cowpunk songs, was one thing he always sort of accused us as.
What was that? Tell Me?
Play, the beat on Tell Me, the boom chick boom doom doom.
Right. Well, that's the closest I could think of. I never would have thought of it as cowpunk, but when you said that, that's the only one I could think of. What else is cowpunk on that record?
There isn't now.
It's a cowpunk record.
It's a cowpunk record. Hey.
It's a stealth cowpunk.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, he encouraged Susanna and me actually to think rhythmically a little bit more expansively on that record in certain places. I mean, James used to be almost a reggae beat, and it changed.
James is one that you wrote and Susanna sings. Is that, did you sing it originally? Like, how did that decision happen?
I did. I'd already been singing it for about 2 years with Amanda and Debbi and Lynn in that band. We'd been performing it for a while. It went a couple ways. One was that it wasn't that I was tired of singing it, but I felt like she was bringing a freshness to it. But also, to be perfectly honest, I mean, Kahn just made no secret of the fact that he preferred her voice pretty much over everything else. So it would be like, you have to say, fuck you, no, man, I'm singing it. It's my song. I'm singing it, whatever. If I wasn't ready to do that. And I wasn't, because I was like, well, you try it. And it was like, well, she sounds great. She sounds great. Yeah, go for it. I mean, the same with He's Got a Secret.
So she hadn't been singing that live before you guys were in the studio.
Not at all.
That and He's Got a Secret were both. Okay.
Mm-hmm, same thing. Yeah.
And then Dover Beach, I think you guys co-wrote?
We definitely co-wrote that one. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a good one.
Thank you. I like that one too. It was fun.
And you had your Going Down to Liverpool, which was a great cover. And I knew Katrina and the Waves a little bit because I think they just had those Canadian records at the time. So
we didn't know them at all actually yet. I'd heard the Kimberly Rue version of Going Down to Liverpool, not the Katrina and the Waves. He did a demo, and it was brought to us by my housemate Spock Dean, who unfortunately just left the planet a matter of weeks ago. But she's the one who brought the song to my attention anyway, and said, "This is a Kimberly Rue song. You got it. This is a great song. You guys should do it." And luckily, she was also working at CBS at that time, so it made it to David Kahn's office too. So he agreed.
And you guys introduced me to Emmett Rhodes on that record too.
There you go. Emmett Rhodes. He was. I mean, back in my high school, I rediscovered his first solo record. I always knew the merry-go-round. I loved She's a Lovely Woman. I loved Live. But he had a solo record called Fresh as a Daisy. And I didn't discover it until probably late 70s, mid 70s when I was in high school. And I just loved it because it's very Beatlesque. It's very Paul McCartney.
Right.
It's very, so Emmett Rhodes was definitely on our hit list for our EP when we were looking and thinking about producers. Actually, we found him. We tracked him down. He was living at his mom's house in, I want to say Redondo Beach or somewhere down in the South Bay. And we found him, and he had a little recording studio out in the garage, and He was out there, and we wanted to ask him to produce our record. And, we're these little, 20-year-olds going, can we please, please, please. He had kind of a soured attitude about everything he had done in the past. And I'm sure it was well warranted and in his brain deserved, but to us it was a downer. So we were like, yeah, we don't want somebody who's feeling embittered and sad. We want someone who's happy and up. So
yeah, we came to you because we love your
and we
past,
love you, and we love everything that you're talking badly about right now. So yeah, Debbi and I actually sang with him on some recordings towards the end of his life, actually, and he was trolled. He didn't seem to be quite as heavy spirited, but he still had that. I don't know exactly what that was. That sort of heavy karma about him.
Mm. You go into record all over the place. It's your debut album. It came out. You guys toured. You guys got reviewed and all that. Did you get out of that experience what you hoped to? And was that like a good thing overall, the way that went
that
down?
album?
Yeah. I mean, and just experience around that album. I mean, again, from the outside, for me as a listener, I'm like, that's great. Can't wait to hear the next one. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what it felt like for you guys.
Well, I don't want to go all Emmett Rhodes on you, but I remember I was dating Jeff McDonald from Red Cross at the time. And I remember coming back to him after a night when we were just wrapping things up. And I remember thinking, I don't know how anyone ever makes a second record. I just don't. I felt so drained at that point. And yet, ironically, it is probably the most representative of who the band really was at that moment of all the records that we made subsequently. And ultimately, it is probably one of my favorite ones to listen to.
What was so draining about it?
What was so draining about it?
Yeah.
Again, the feeling that it was a constant struggle. It's the struggle to try and maintain what you feel is your identity as a band. And being a serial band member, I was way more focused on the collective and what is this band going to sound like, and what are we going to be bringing into the world here, and struggling against the forces that were looking at it in an entirely different way.
When the album actually came out, were you able to just enjoy it as an album, or was there constant pressure on pumping up the single, doing something commercial, like the pressure? Did the pressure exceed the pleasure in we're playing these songs that we really like?
I always liked playing the songs live, and still to this day, even though we don't all do all that much from all over the place, or Bangles haven't in recent years, but of course, we were immediately pushed into promotion mode, and there was no break. You're immediately going out on a 6-week promotional tour. You're going to Europe, not to play shows, but just to do TV and interviews, and then you're going out on a proper 8-week tour, and then you'll be home for another 10 days, and then you're going out on another tour, and then you're going to be home for 6 weeks, and then we're going back to the studio. It was that kind of, it was
right.
Like, wow, wait, what, huh, what? So it was that classic, you have your whole life to write your first record, and 2 weeks to write the second.
Was there a lot of micromanagement of how you did those interviews and how you presented yourselves and all of that?
No, we pretty much left our devices, I would say.
And how much of Different Light that album was written at this point, or did you really just turn that around really fast?
No, very little. And that was a problem. And it was only a problem in retrospect. It didn't really occur to me at the time how much of a problem it was going to be, but that there was really a time bomb ticking, and there was a clock on it. And I didn't realize that. And I think I would have maybe spent a little more energy trying to develop that muscle that allows you to write songs on the road, that people like Prince had, and other people who were able to just, come back from a show, and instead of having a snack and reading a novel and then finally going to sleep, writing a song and recording a demo, and just working that way all the time. And we weren't at that level traveling in any kind of luxury. We didn't have a bus. We were all in a van, and together we were sharing rooms. There wasn't a lot of, creative solitude. So for me, it was not conducive to songwriting at all.
Right. Annette had left after the EP. You guys did bring in Michael Steele, so she changed her mind about joining you guys.
She did. Well, she and I ended up being housemates, and she has actually been quoted as saying that it's the one calculated move she'd ever made. She'd seen us play around in town and liked the band. And I remember we were kind of circling her again too, starting to talk to her, because Annette was making it clear that she wasn't really happy in the band, and she wasn't a strong harmony singer. She really wanted to do more cowpunk. She wanted to do more of that style, rockabilly, and that was really her love. It was absolutely a joint decision for her to move on before we signed with CBS, actually. And so we needed a bass player. And I remember asking Mickey one night, it was an after party show. It was like probably 4 a.m. And I remember saying, if you had your ultimate choice to be in a band, how would you describe that band? And she'd say something like, well, I think it would be the Kinks with Fairport Convention vocals. And I'm like, I love that answer.
Yeah.
And then I remember her saying, if I were ever to join your band, do I have to wear plastic mini skirts? Because we had played the Whiskey, and we had made plastic dresses with like vinyl cutouts and that sort of thing. And I was like, no, you can wear whatever you want. It's fine. Don't worry. She had a very strong fashion sense, as she still does. And so luckily, what she did is she moved into the house where I was living, the aforementioned Spock Hotel. And it's also where Steve Wynn was living briefly. And so it was a wonderful little creative spot right on Crescent Heights in Los Angeles. And so Mickey was my housemate. And so when it came time to audition bass players, we auditioned a few people, but we just asked Mickey, would you think of playing? And it was a no-brainer, of course.
Did you expect her to write songs at that point too?
I didn't know if she was a writer or not at that point. I knew she could sing.
So she came in before All Over the Place, didn't have any songs on that, but then wrote. Did she write one? I know she sings September Girls and Following. Is that it?
Following.
On
the original.
Right. What was it like incorporating another songwriter into the group on top of everything else?
She was obviously a strong writer, but she seemed to keep her writer identity apart from Susanna or me. It seemed like she wasn't terribly interested in co-writing, and which made me sad, because one of my sort of, again, REM business models was that the band would be the songwriters. It's the Beatles for me.
Right.
It's like John and Paul and George are the writers, and that very quickly fell apart, and during Different Light, and I wish I'd, been able to write more with my bandmates, but it just didn't, they weren't feeling that same thing, I think. Yeah.
I mean, her songs are strong, but they always seemed a little bit more like a satellite around some of the other stuff, like not quite in the center of it, if I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess she got the George Harrison treatment in a way. It's like, yes, of course you can have some songs, but I mean, there was never a hard and fast rule. Like, well, you can only have 1.3 songs on this record, It was never like that. But, but she brought in some really strong songs and some ones that we just had a blast doing, like Glitter Years and,
It's a good one.
Yeah.
So Different Light, you're in a hurry. They reunite you with David Kahn. Did you have to sign off on that, or was that just sort of like, nah, this is what we're doing? They
definitely wanted, I should say. I didn't really understand the dynamics that he was a staff producer and they were determined to use him, that was what they wanted to have happen.
Was he like promoted or something too? Like, did he become like an A&R guy by the second record?
Yeah, he was definitely promoted, but it was also like, then he was getting pressured. We need a hit now. That was fun. That was nice. That was good. You made a decent record with these girls, who we're not even sure what we think of yet, or we don't know how to market. But now we need a hit. So let's get serious here. As it turned out, well, two things. One was that we weren't sure we wanted to work with David again because it was divisive. The first record, one of his MOs is divide and conquer. like get everyone kind of in separate corners so you can kind of manipulate a little bit better and get what you need out of what you think you need out of these people.
Which is the last thing you want when you're trying to be REM.
Exactly. Thank you. And the last thing you want when you're trying to operate as a band in a unit.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Like not that you were trying to be REM, but trying to have that collective identity, all for one sort of mentality.
He did have to sort of woo us back after the second record. He actually was sent to, I remember having a dinner with him in New Orleans. We were playing in New Orleans. I was already there with my family, and I'd gone there a little bit early, and Debbi and I had, and Sue and Mickey and David Kahn flew in for this show, and he knew he had to kind of woo us back. And I remember at this dinner just saying, that there were a lot of things that happened that weren't okay in that studio. And he's like, I know, I get it. I'm listening. I hear you. He was very accommodating, and I just determined to get this. It was like getting a business account for him or something. That's how it felt, but we agreed to, it was sort of the path of least resistance, I guess, to say, okay, all right, we'll try it again. We'll see where we're at. And so the second time around, it was very different. And there were way more outside writers and material being brought in, partially to, I'm sure it was because of that timeline, and we weren't coming up with hit songs hand over fist. So
whatever he sold you, it wasn't what he delivered. It doesn't sound like.
Well, not entirely. I mean, he couldn't be anything other than who he is. And plus he was going through crazy personal stuff at the time. A lot of stuff was out of his control. I'm just giving him that, way out as well at that time. But yeah, it was rough. The second album was worse in a lot of ways. But again, but we were learning as we went, and so there were skills that were being developed. So in some ways, we were getting better about things.
So Prince had seen you guys when you were touring all over the place, and that, like, aside from them bringing in stuff, he'd already just given you Manic Monday, or like, how did that work?
Yes, he basically handed over a cassette with Manic Monday on it, and so that was kind of the label, just like the heavens opened and the angels sang, because they said, okay, we got this now, we're good. We have a Prince song that we can promote, but not as Prince, quote unquote, because he was determined to connect it with a film he was doing at the time, and his character was named Christopher. So he was determined to only credit the song as written by Christopher.
Right. Nobody knew it was Prince.
Nobody knew. Worst secret in all of rock and roll. Yes. And they made sure that was the case. But it served a purpose for them and for us. And it was a fine song. I was like very happy to do it. Very happy to record it, and he was, in his princely way, offering it up as, here, I have the tracks, all you have to do is do the vocals, it's all good. And we're like, thank you, your royal purpleness, but no, we will actually record the tracks and do our version of it, and hopefully you will like it. And he did, which apparently, hearing from people who worked with him on other tracks, because he wrote for a lot of artists, as you probably know, and he did not like when people did that, and he wanted to control the way a song was produced and recorded and how it came into the world. So he, luckily for us, he liked how we did it.
How did his arrangement differ from what you guys did with it?
It wasn't totally different. There was a couple of different shifts. We did the bridge a little differently. He didn't have the harpsichord thing on his demo.
Oh, okay.
Riff, yeah. It was a riff that was kind of like that, but it wasn't with that instrumentation. And
who played the harpsichord?
On our version, I don't remember, to be honest.
Well, it wasn't one of you four.
It wasn't one of the four of us. No, it wasn't.
So I remember that album coming out, and I probably heard Manic Monday on the radio beforehand. But I remember putting on the record, and like Manic Monday is this very, polished, produced single. Which I liked, but then Different Like kicks in with like the guitar. And I'm like, okay, here's like the band. Like, this is what the band sounds like. And I don't remember really ever being that conscious with any record of like how the production of like the single and then the next song can differ from one another. But to me, it's like when that album came out, I was just like, oh, like the songs are In a Different Light and Let It Go. Like, those are the ones that pop to me. And so I thought, oh, okay, those are like the next singles or whatever. And not that I know it.
Good luck.
When you sort of follow a band from when they're less popular and they become more popular, it's sort of this mixed thing where you're happy because you're like, I picked the winner, you know, but also you're just like, oh, now all these other people are on the bandwagon, and I'm the original.
They were mine.
I'm a charter member of it.
Yes.
But anyway, I was like happy because you guys were doing well, but I also sort of thought people should know them because for a different light and let it go as much as they know them for, If She Knew What She Wants and Walk Like an Egyptian.
Yes. Well, there was definitely, again, politics and money involved. But when we were making those records, the time spent on the production of Manic Monday versus Different Light was, you couldn't even measure them in hours. It was just like, with like Different Lights, like, okay, are we in tune? Okay, go. Okay, that's good. Moving on. It was like very much, we're just throwing that one in here, throwing in the same with, I felt that with a lot of the songs that weren't quote unquote singles from the get-go. And I'm sure this happens with a lot of bands, but it was very obvious to me and sonically apparent. I think you noticed it. The thing that you liked about it, that sort of roughness, it sounds like the band, it's like distorted guitars and, a riff and this sort of thing, was probably the very thing that wouldn't make it a single. I don't know. This is how they were thinking at the time. Don't forget, it was the mid 80s. Right.
And Debbi told the story about just how, Walk Like an Egyptian, you all had to basically audition to sing one of the 3 verses. And she felt like she was voted off the island on that one and couldn't play drums on it because they used the drum machine.
Yeah.
So she had this kind of mixed feeling about that song. I mean, were you guys happy that was a huge hit? Was that a good thing for you guys?
It was a good thing. It was a mixed blessing because first of all, I didn't think they would release that. It was too weird of a song. I remember talking to my manager and after we put out If She Knew, and he's like, well, what do you think the 3rd single is going to be? And I said, well, if CBS has any balls, they put out Egyptian, but that's never going to happen, because I thought it was so quirky. It was, unlike Manic Monday, which I felt kind of fit into our world sonically and structurally, Egyptian is completely insane, and God bless Liam Sternberg, just so creative, but so insane. And aside from the vocal audition thing, which was horrific, and like, you don't do that to a band, in my opinion, it was kind of fun to make because that rhythm loop we're using an old school Lynn drum machine,
right,
from the 80s, but we also kind of created a rhythm loop. We made, we had, David Kahn had these weird shakers that he brought back from Mexico or Puerto Rico or someplace. It were like devil heads, or I just remember them being creepy looking, but fun. And trash can lids and, just making noise. And that was actually enjoyable, creating that rhythm loop that we kind of did as a gang. It was like kindergarten, rhythm class, and there were certain aspects of it that I thought were really fun, but it was completely that did not jive with my sense of who the band was. No.
It is a fun song. It's a fun single. Like, I understand why it was a hit. I wasn't like, oh, turn that off. I was like, nah, I enjoyed it, but it didn't, again, being a charter member, there wasn't like, well, this is, people don't get,
not my band. This is not my band, right?
It was still my band, but okay, when you played the album live, it all sounded really good, but there was like some stuff that was more on mission than others, and like even like the synths on If She Knew What She Wants sounded like foreign to me on a Bangles record, but then again, so much of the 80s sounded foreign to me at the time. I mean, like, Elvis Costello was putting that stuff on Goodbye Cruel World, and I was like, what?
Come on, dude.
Then he pulled it back for King of America and Blood and Chocolate. So people go back and forth.
No, I'm with you, and there were a lot of sounds I was not a fan of the chorused guitar that everybody used. We used it very sparingly. I don't remember ever saying, "Oh, let's use a chorus on that." I just never liked it. I thought it was an overused sound. I was never a huge fan of the gated snare and the
right.
You know it as soon as you hear it, you're like, oh, it's 1986. Some of those sounds are so, so specific to the.
It's a timestamp.
Absolutely.
Like there are timestamps from 67, which I tend to like, like all the phase shifts and stuff. But yeah, those timestamps from like 84, 85, 86 are just like, well, yeah. I mean, the Prince stuff has that too. Like some Prince songs sound fantastic, and some Prince songs No offense to Prince, who I think is obviously fantastic, but some of it is just like, oh, it sounds a little
It's
thin
just
and
that moment. Yeah, it's very
synthy.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like the ruffled socks with the Mary Janes from it was like the me being put in a kimono for The Hero Takes a Fall. It's like the clothes, the ruffles, it is that's so identifiable to that moment, which maybe isn't a bad thing. Maybe it's kind of cool. I mean, you think of 1965 fashion, you're going to think of a certain kind of this kind of mini dress and this kind of haircut and this kind of makeup and this, I'm very time specific when it comes to those sort of aesthetics. But sonically, I'd like things to be a little more classic in the sense that they can live in any time and place and not be so specific to one.
Right. So within the band, you guys are all on the same page pretty much, in that first EP and starting off all over the place. How much were you on the same page by the time the whole Different Light album and tour and promotion had played out?
I think you can see it from the album cover, where it's like, let's just go to individual shots because we're never actually going to agree on a band shot. It started to become very individualistic already, and I spent a lot of energy trying to be the diplomat and the glue and to keep this thing together, but it was already sort of shifting.
And do you think that was more from external forces or internal? I mean, I know you talked about David Kahn obviously pushing Susanna as like the front woman when you were a band of, a bunch of front people before then. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much of a difference that made, or whether it was also that your just interests started diverging.
It was definitely both. I mean, I'm sure the conversations that were happening in the offices of the label were specific to, what's the easiest way to market this group. And, Susanna has the radio friendly voice. And so we're going to go with that. And let's just, that's where we're going. But it also, was also within the band. I mean, people had their specific ideas and their energies and their opportunistic ways of looking at things and aspirations and ambitions.
Your ambitions were not aligned at that point.
They were not.
What were your ambitions?
My ambitions was keep the frickin' band together, really. And to portray us the way I had always envisioned it, which was a band of equals and a band with a voice. And if that voice, not necessarily from one human person, but a collective voice, i.e. through songwriting and musically, our musical modalities, our music, the sounds, the things that we're referencing, that we'd started so clearly as the Bangs, we knew exactly where we came from and what brought us here and why we were loving what we were loving. And those things started to shift, and that's okay. That's called growth, and that's fine. It just made me sad that we were sort of splintering off into different corners again. And, and that was definitely encouraged.
And then Everything, the third album, produced by David Sigerson. So you're out of the David Kahn universe, but there's a lot of co-songwriting on it, but not that much within the band. It's Correct. A lot of co-songwriting outside of the band.
Outside the band. Again, same situation. And I'd even been studying, people were trying to encourage me, you should just, let's just get some songwriting sessions set up with you. And I'm like, yeah, I would like that with my bandmates, but they were not into that. So, and I think with Sue, she just figured out she was going to do better by writing with people outside of the band who were professional hit songwriters. And that was a very savvy move. And I totally get it. It just was not what I wanted for the band. And it's not what, I wanted to do personally, but I was sort of, you should try and write with this person or this person. And this. So I took a bunch of writing sessions and it wasn't my comfort zone because at the time I was mostly a solo writer and or writing with somebody I considered my quote unquote partner, which at that time was Susanna, but she was not interested in doing that anymore. So that was sad to me. That was actually a heartbreak.
You tried to write more with her and you just weren't able to.
Yeah, it just didn't come together.
I'm looking at the like Watching the Sky was when you co-wrote on that record.
Yeah, which is basically a song that I brought to her and we finished it together, but I wrote 90% of it. which is fine. That happens.
It wasn't you two sitting with your guitars, laughing and coming up with stuff and all that stuff.
It wasn't.
I mean, the Beatles kind of quit doing that too, and they still did all right. But
absolutely.
this is sort of your, but it wasn't like as much collaborating outside of the band like this.
Right.
This was.
They didn't do that. They had set up their perimeters very clearly, and it's okay to, John's going to bring in a song and it's 99% done, and maybe Paul will come up with 2 ideas or whatever, and they're going to grow it as a band, but it's still a Lennon McCartney song.
Right.
And that's how they always did it. That was just it.
So what was the experience of the Everything album like for you?
It was not a bad experience, and that's mostly because of Davitt, who was just a lovely human and another very intelligent man who knew that he had a sort of a powder keg on his hands in certain ways, like things were tense. We still had a lot of fun, and we were, enjoying the process, and we always tracked live at the beginning of the process. It was something that we always did. So we played these songs together as a band live. And then, because it was the 80s, you'd go through and systematically replace single thing you just recorded, which is completely ridiculous, but that's what we did. But Davitt made everything fun. He was just a lovely person. And I think he got the best record he could have out of us at that time. Because it was like the White Album. We would track together, but then it was time for someone to do their lead vocal. They were there alone with Davitt and the engineers. And
when Eternal Flame was brought in, did you think, oh, here's the big hit?
Yes and no. I thought, here's the big hit for anybody. It just didn't remotely sound like a Bangles song to me. It was obviously a Susanna vehicle, which at the time I was like, we've had enough of that, So yeah, if I was just the savvy business person, I would have said, yeah, let's go. This is going to be great. But again, kudos to Davitt, I think, because he found a way to make that song beautiful, and it is lush and it's romantic and it's all these things, but it could have been really corny. And I don't think it is in the end. I think he did a good job. Susanna sang it beautifully. I didn't really want it on the record, to be honest. I didn't think it fit. I thought it was too soloistic and just, I said, give it to Whitney Houston. She'll have a huge hit with it. It could have been anybody would add a huge hit with it.
Right. So you actually argued to keep it off the record even after it was recorded?
I'm an idiot. No. Before
it was recorded.
Demo. Yeah. No. By the time we made the record, it was like, oh yeah, I get it.
Well, I could see. I mean, again, it's one of those songs where it's like it's this undeniable hit single, but it's also like, that's not my Bangles. That's a different Bangles.
But it hadn't been for a while, to be honest. So I should have just, at that point, I was sort of just like, to quote ourselves, let it go. Yeah.
At what point did you realize that you were not going to be able to keep the band together?
Not until the very, very end, because I'm a very tenacious / stubborn person. And and it wasn't literally until the meeting that was called that my sister and I thought was about discussing the Australian tour that we had coming up, and that there were strikes going on in Australia. We may have to reschedule that tour, and ticket sales. We had to figure out what we're going to do about all of that. And I thought that's what this meeting was. And I walk into a living room of our new manager, and our entire team is there. Our lawyer is there. Our business manager is there. I'm like, okay, this is very strange. And that's sort of like, then the bomb was dropped. It was just like, Susanna doesn't want to do this anymore, and neither does Mickey. So it's over.
Peterson sisters cast aside.
Sisters cast aside.
Is that what it felt like?
Absolutely. We felt like idiots, and we felt like we were completely in the dark about this. And this had been something that had clearly been planned and discussed and arranged, and completely without us, because our manager at that time was very aware and savvy enough to know that, well, he's never going to split up the Peterson sisters. So, and if he just takes Susanna out as a solo artist, well, then there's still 3 Bangles left, and they might reform and start a competition. So we can't have that. So let's just make sure that, Michael, who was also very unhappy, to be honest, in the situation, and was ready to make a move herself, he was like, yay, this is easy. I just take these two and these two can stay over there. And, there's no threat there because they're not going to be the Bangles as the Peterson sisters. Although we could have been.
Right.
Was, we absolutely could have been. But such a heartbreak and such exhaustion at that point. Everyone was exhausted. So.
What was Michael Steele's, Vicki's issue at that point? Did she want to go solo as well, or? She
did eventually. I don't know that she was thinking along those lines at that moment. Although she might have been. I think the evil manager was sort of putting things in her ear that he would represent her, and which of course he did not do. So I think she was just looking for a way out too. She was very unhappy. The last tour was sort of miserable.
What was so miserable about it? You're sort of four buses for four different people sort of thing?
No. We never did the Fleetwood Mac thing. We never, first of all, couldn't afford it. No, we were always in one bus at that point. Did finally have our own rooms. We never toured with like major luxury models. But it was just the stress of feeling like everyone again was just wanting different things and not in a healthy way, and not being able to talk about it out of fear, and not being able to address the issues. And it seems so silly. And also you're emotionally and physically exhausted because we toured a lot and we didn't say no to almost anything. And we finally said no to one thing that the label wanted us to do. We finally said no, and they came back and they were like, "Well, what do you want? What do you need?" We're like, "Well, okay, we fly our boyfriends over first class. You give us this, you give us that." We're like things we'd never thought to ask for before, and they were like, "Okay." So, and it was all around when Debbi was getting married, and we didn't want to. I don't know. We were exhausted.
Right. And you weren't all just kind of hanging out, having fun, like, when you're on the road or something.
Not a lot. There was some of it still, but no, it felt very fragmented for sure.
So what happened right after that? Like, did you just sort of crawl into a hole for a while, or did you?
Yeah, I wasn't sure I was going to want to play music again. I was heartbroken.
Debbi said that she went like 6 months without like playing any music or listening to music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I did listen to music. I took a break, but then I had some songs that I was writing and finishing writing, and I did some recording with my then fiance. And then within 6 months, he was diagnosed with leukemia. And so everything that was happening before just shifted and became unimportant. And I went to Philadelphia with him to be with him while he was getting treatment.
Oh, wow. Is he still with us? I should know that, but I don't know.
He's not. He died about a year after he was diagnosed. So he died
I'm sorry.
in June of 91. Yeah. But so my obviously priorities took over at that point, and there were more important things in life than being in a band at that time.
Yeah. No. Like they say in Spinal Tap, too much fucking perspective.
Too much fucking perspective. But, absolutely.
And Continental Drifters started in early 90s, like not
right
long
after that.
Yeah.
Kind of leapfrogged from. That's why I always say that they saved my life, because jumping into the Continental Drifters, and that was just that was a offshoot of working with Susan Cowsill, who was my best friend through this period of time, and she and I started writing songs together and started singing together, and really enjoying that experience. Again, singing with somebody who it felt like we had what I call the sibling blend. It was almost like singing with a blood relative, and which I just love that so much. And so that was really restorative for me. And that was 91, it was, again, this bam, bam, bam happened. And she and I ran into sort of the Continental Drifters through our friend Mark Walton, who was in the Drifters and owned Uncle Studios, where we were rehearsing. We rehearsed with the Psycho Sisters. We were auditioning band members, including her brother John, weirdly. Now my
speaking of family, yes.
Family. And I remember Susan and I sat there, watched these guys play, and then, oh my God, we were just completely enamored / blown away / wondering how we could get them all to stop smoking, because they were going to be our band. Like that's some hubris, but that didn't happen. But what did happen is that we started singing with them, and eventually kind of got absorbed.
So you really thought you originally thought they were just going to be the Psycho Sisters backing band?
Yeah, we want to use them as a Psycho Sisters band. They write great, they're amazing, they play great. I know, like that's some chutzpah.
I saw you guys at South by Southwest, and I think the first one I went to was 91. So it would have been there like 91, 92. And I don't know if it was like one of your debut performances, but I remember going with Greg Kot, the Tribune rock critic, and like, oh, we got to go see the Continental Drifters because, Vicki Peterson of the Bangles and Peter Holsapple of the DBs. And I was a big DBs fan too. There's another one of my bands who they didn't quite get as huge, but I was always rooting for them too. And, and other people who I'd heard of, but and Susan Cowsill, who I heard of, but I didn't really know the Cowsills that well. But I thought that sounds cool. Yeah, and there were like all these people on this little club stage, and then you're taking turns. Everyone had songs. I'm just like, all right, let's have another Vicki song. Let's have another Peter song, and you had to sort of wait your turn. And they were all good songs, but it's like you had you come into it with history with some of them.
Your favorites. Oh, man, but it was such a great experience, and that experience for me never really changed. It was always wonderful, and the band changed enormously from 91 to 2001, 2003. I mean, we are still drifters. To this day, we're working on there's a book being written. There's a tribute record being made. There's a best of coming out next year.
Reunion tour, the big reunion tour.
Probably, we'll do something like that next year for sure.
You got to herd all those cats.
I know, and there's a lot of cats to herd.
Yeah, you should get everyone who was ever a Continental Drifter to be part of it.
Well, we did that actually in what was it, 2015, 16? We had a big reunion, and we had every single drifter on stage. And you'll see the picture on our website, Continental Drifters. We had Gary Eaton, we had Danny Magoo, we had Ray Ganeshow, everybody. And all the originals, and then all the latecomers, and the Psycho Sisters.
was that a refreshing experience for you to be part of a group of musicians, like a real collective where the spotlight's not on anyone? It's seemingly not ego driven. You're just an ensemble.
It was like I said, it was life-saving, because I really wasn't sure I wanted to be involved in music again or still. And the Drifters was exactly what I needed, because it was completely a collective. And I didn't have a starring role really. And I was just kind of the auxiliary guitar player to start out. And so there wasn't a lot of responsibility, and but there was a whole lot of camaraderie and fun, lots of fun.
No, I had a great spirit about it. I remember, again, seeing a bunch of those shows. I had the self-titled debut. I had Vermilion. It was great. And was there ever a point where you were either approached or you thought, you know what, I'm just going to do the Vicki Peterson solo album?
No, not yet. It's sort of been popping in my head recently, but I'm very involved in this project I'm doing with John right now. So even that's kind of good, putting things aside. But I am starting to write more with that in my head. But I just didn't. And again, I'm sure it's just part of my personality or something. I really enjoy performing. I really enjoy songwriting. Our year here in Brooklyn has been full of opportunities to be just a singer, which is something that I didn't get enough of in my lifetime before. Just getting invited to come up and sing a Dusty Springfield song. Come sing a Dionne Warwick song. Come sing just stuff I would never think of attacking. And I'm going to sing an Alanis Morissette song next week. It's just like these things we never got to do.
Were you singing an Alanis Morissette song?
At a karaoke bar here in Brooklyn called Sid Gold's Request Room. We're doing an Alanis birthday celebration, and it's basically karaoke. It's just piano karaoke.
Wow.
But a bunch of us are getting together to lay homage at the feet of Miss Morissette.
What night is that? That's
the 4th. John and I are playing some shows in New York, playing on the 26th at that same little karaoke bar. We're playing at a very cool listening room in Hoboken in July. We're doing some stuff.
So you do a lot of making music with family, and Susan now is family because you married her brother.
Much to her chagrin.
Your drummer was your sister, and now your drummer's your husband.
Yes.
Is that part of sort of the I don't know, the allure of music for you, is just making it with people who you're really close with?
Yes, I think it has to be. I mean, other than writing songs, which is most comfortably for me a solo enterprise, but as far as creating the music and turning that song into something that someone might actually want to listen to, I want friends and help with that, and I especially now will only do that with people I like and enjoy. That's just not going to ever be an option again. Like John and I were saying to somebody earlier today, I was on the phone with Mickey Steele actually earlier, and we were saying we only play with people we like, and that's just only nice people allowed, and that's just how it is. It's be nice or leave. It's the New Orleans motto: be nice or leave.
So you and Susan Cowsill have co-written some songs. Is that more like one of you finishing the other one's song, or is that actually sort of the old fashioned?
Mostly in a room. Mostly in a room together, yeah, or on a mountaintop or somewhere strange. But the songs that we've written together were definitely collaborative that way.
And you feel like you have that kind of, again, sisterly sort of harmony thing going on with her too.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, again, you described it like that before you even related to her, but it's like that family feeling. That's what makes it sound great.
I know, it was strange because the first time we sang together, she said, "Wow, you sound like I'm singing with my brother Barry," and so then. Interestingly enough, John and I the project that we're working on right now is we made a record in honor of and tribute to Bill and Barry Cowsill, and it's a cover record of their songs, and some of which have been recorded before with Bill's band in Canada, but some of which have not been ever recorded before, and some of Barry's songs. And I tended to choose the Barry songs for whatever reason to sing. It was a connection that I had with him.
So having, done the Continental Drifters and done all the singing and writing with Susan Cowsill, like, what was it like going back to being with the Bangles for, you had the Awesome Powers song, and then you had Doll Revolution 2003. Like, what did it take to get to the point where you could make music with them again?
For me, it was actually years. I was kind of kicking and screaming to come back, and Susanna was the one who was calling every few months. She would call and say, "Hey, we got this offer to do this thing, or would you be at all interested in coming back?" And I was always saying, "I'm not interested in doing a 80s package tour. I'm not interested in doing anything that's just a revisionist nostalgia thing, because I'm having too much fun making actual real-time music in New Orleans with my friends." So, and then plus I remember, I think at one point I said, you couldn't afford to buy the therapy I would need to go back and sing Walk Like an Egyptian, because that's how I felt at the time. I felt like so removed from anything I could possibly do. It's funny how time changes. But what I was open to was like, but if you want to write some new music and maybe record, and I said I'd be open to that. And so that took a while to happen. And then the Austin Powers thing was the opportunity that made that work. And that's what started the ball rolling, actually, with us recording together. And then we were invited to be part of a celebration of the Beatles at Hollywood Bowl, the sort of their 1964 concert. And they were having a reunion, not a reunion, an anniversary. And Sir George Martin was going to lead the symphony, the Hollywood Bowl Philharmonic, and we were invited to come sing. And I don't know about you, but I'm not going to say no to something like that. So that was our first time on stage together, which is in 1999, I believe, with Mickey as well. So all four of us.
Felt good.
It was great. It was fantastic. Yeah. And then we went from there to making another record.
Did you have to have any sort of group, if we want to call it group therapy, but some sort of group meeting where you sat down and said, now about that last meeting we had and the way we left things, we need to talk about this before we move forward?
We did do that. Yes, absolutely. We did. We sat down and said, we gotta be open with each other. And if if any one of us feels really strongly about something, especially about not doing something, then the others need to listen to her. Because we want to make sure no one's going to be forced to do something they were not comfortable with. And that was sort of we did set up some guardrails in a way, some guidelines of how to function as a group, which I think was a good idea. And that worked for the most part until it didn't. But yeah.
And you did the Doll Revolution with Brad Wood, who I knew from Chicago before he moved out to the Valley. And I would imagine he is not the sort of tell you what to do sort of producer. So I would think that was a total different experience for you making that album.
Yeah, it felt like a collaboration for sure with Brad, and just a wonderful personality, very easygoing, but also very smart and very musical, and very always the wrong word, but I can't think of quite another word to substitute for like organic. I mean, he was not trying to force anything upon us that didn't feel natural to us in any way. So yeah, he was great. That was fun.
Did you feel like there was more of the sort of collaboration among you on that album too, in terms of songwriting and everything else?
Yeah. So and making the songs come to fruition and growing them and, playing with them. And there was a sense of playfulness.
So you had that album, and then you had Sweetheart of the Sun 8 years later. So that's 2011. Were you thinking at the time, oh, we'll just sort of do one of these every once in a while? Or did you think, oh, we're going to get back on that, album every couple of years, sort of album tour sort of dynamic that we sort of interrupted, many years earlier?
There was not a lot of political will for that sort of treadmill thing to start up again. That feeling of like, spend 3 months making a record, then spend 18 months promoting it, and then 3 weeks later starting another record, and then there were families and kids and lives involved at this point, and nobody wanted that. So it was really just, let's make this record, and it wasn't easy to get that first record out. I mean, we financed it ourselves. We played a bunch of shows, took that money, made the record. Tried to find a partner, sort of found the right partner, label partner to put it out, but it was still everything was a little sketchy. And, the business was changing so rapidly at that point in the early 21st century that we were coming up against some of those changes in a difficult way, to be honest. And so it was a little rough. And then we toured, but we weren't going to tour like we toured. We weren't going to do 12-week tours. It just wasn't that was not in the cards for anybody really. And then, so those years went by, those 8 years in between the records went by very quickly. And we did sporadic touring in that time. Everyone had other projects that they were doing. And Debbi was involved with, she still had young kids. Susanna was doing solo stuff. And so when we came together to work on Sweetheart of the Sun, it was just another opportune moment where Susanna had been working with Matthew. We all knew and loved Matthew from other, previous interactions with him. And so that's where we started making that one. And then we basically finished it in all our home studios between Susanna's and mine.
You were at Matthew Sweet's house for a while, right? Like he had a home studio.
Everything, all the early tracking was done at Matthew's home.
And I think the credit on it is produced by the Bangles, like with Matthew Sweet. But it's clear that you guys are producing it and he's there, but he's not calling the shots on it. You guys.
Well, it depends on I've also seen it produced by Matthew Sweet. So it was a co-production. I mean, he was leading the charge sonically. He was manning the desk in the early days, but then we took it to Sue's house, did a lot of the vocals there. I took it to my house. I did guitars, and then I engineered my own sessions there, did vocals at my house, so it was just kind of it was a group effort, but it was sporadic.
Did you like that process?
Didn't mind it because I was just getting to know, I was starting to really enjoy recording and engineering on my own, actually. I felt that very liberating.
And then the last thing you recorded together was that 3x4
Mhm.
where you're like covering songs by the 3 o'clock and Dream Syndicate. That's what you always say. Um, Anything else that's going to get you guys back in the studio together or on stage together?
I don't know. I mean, we have some things coming up next year. We have a biography coming out first of the year. Working on a documentary. It's sort of taking its time to come together. So I'm not sure where that's at the moment, but these things are all in play right now, and that I never say never anymore because I said never and I was wrong. so I wised up on that one. And so I'm open to opportunities.
Would you like it?
It depends. It depends on what it was. Probably in a limited way, I think it would be really fun to play some of those songs again, but I'm really enjoying what I'm doing right now with John. And right now that's my focus.
Do you feel like your musical taste has changed over the years? And, did you sort of grow in ways where, like, again, when you're like young and you have the same records as your bandmates and friends. And then later it's like, oh, these decades have passed and you've been listening to this stuff and they've been listening to that stuff and you're playing different stuff and writing different stuff. Like, does everything just kind of diverge naturally to some extent?
I'm sure it does for most people. I think it should. It's like, I'm just not going to be that guy who still listens to the same, 12 records I had when I was 17. I, like Debbi, went through a period of time, actually even longer, where I just wasn't listening to a lot of music at all. And so I have some catching up to do, even in the 21st century pop and rock and stuff. So I've been listening to more of that recently, more quote unquote contemporary music, and just sort of out of curiosity, like, is what's going to grab me, what isn't going to grab me now.
And when you write songs now, do you write songs because you think, okay, I need to sit down and write a song, or will you just like be walking somewhere and you'll think, oh, there's an idea, I got to pursue that?
Yes. Again,
another all the above answer.
Same answer. I've spoken to students before about songwriting, and I always say you have to have the window open. The window has to be open because you have to be receiving the creative impulse, spirit, however you want to look at it, the ghosts, the angels, and you have to be open to it, because when I'm not, it just doesn't show up. But when I am, it tends to show up, and it's a muscle. So you need to rehearse it. You need to exercise it. But then you also have to sit down and just apply the effort.
So you still do that? Like you still make a point of doing it?
Yeah. And more recently, actually.
At some point, was it in the 90s, you toured with the Go-Go's? You were filling in for Charlotte Caffey?
Yeah, 95.
Yeah. So, like, what was it like stepping into another band's dynamic, and what did you sort of observe about them that reminded you of things and also seemed like totally different from anything you experienced?
Yeah. It was fascinating, actually, because there was the sense of liberation, because it wasn't my band. So I wasn't responsible for ticket sales or anything that happened. I just was there to do a job, which was to play these parts. And I knew all of them. We met obviously over the years several times. Charlotte was a friend. Kathy and I had interactions and everything. So I knew them all, which I'd sung on Belinda's records, 2 of Belinda's records, solo records, and done TV with her too. So these were people I knew, and it was very comfortable for me that way. But it was also very interesting to watch the dynamics of another group of people who have known each other a long, long, long time and have been through a lot and have been, more ruthless with each other than the Bangles ever were with each other. And yet we're able to come together and work as a unit, which I thought was really admirable. And it was really fun. It was fun to play parts that I don't normally play. And, I get Charlotte and what she plays on guitar, and hung out with Jane. Actually, was just emailing with Jane because she's going to be involved in a charity we're doing in January called Joey's Song. Jane Reed and Debbi Peterson and Vicki Peterson will be on stage together in January in Minneapolis.
Cool.
I'm sorry, in Madison, not Minneapolis. In Madison.
That's even closer.
I know, but there you go. It is. You should come.
What did you learn about the Go-Go's that you didn't know before you were actually a Go-Go for a little bit?
I can't tell you.
Can't tell me meaning there's something, but you just don't want to say it, or that
Yes.
you really don't know.
There's things I don't want to say.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. This isn't about the Go-Go's anyway, but I just thought it was interesting that you'd sort of moonlighted in that band.
Yes. It was really interesting. I felt like, no, I just need to be in L7 and Belly and I'm good to go. I've been in most of the cool band in Hole.
You got to join Fanny now and just do the whole historical thing.
I have joined Fanny. Well, we sang on the Fanny record, the new Fanny record.
All right. If you could just choose 3 Bangles songs that are like the representative Bangles songs, what would they be?
Hero Takes a Fall, Dover Beach, and Annalise, Sweetheart of the Sun.
Oh, nice. That's a good one. I'll just listen to that record. I really enjoy it.
It was because again, it was something that grew out of a collective passion that we had for the whole history of Laurel Canyon and Carole King and Tony Stern and just that whole time and feel. And I think we kind of did a nice job of conjuring that.
It's a good one. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks
so much, Vicki. All right, bye.
Okay.
That's it for episode 138 of Caropop. Thanks so much to Vicki Peterson for making such indelible music and for helping us see it in a different light. She is on Instagram at Vicki Peterson Official and Twitter X at Vicki Bangle. Aside from all the Bangles albums being available, you can listen to and buy the Psycho Sisters album Up on the Chair, Beatrice on Bandcamp. And seek out the Action Skulls album Angel Here as well. Caropop is produced by Chris Swake, who also is more than meets the eye. For a mere $24, you can become a Caropop friend and help keep this thing going. Please contribute at caropop.com. Your support is much appreciated. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow Caropop on Twitter X and Instagram at Caropopcast. You can follow me as well at Mark Caro at MarkCaro. Please share this episode, subscribe, tell your friends, and tune in again next week for another Caropop conversation. Thanks.